Hey guys, we're going to talk a little bit about how people, specifically husbands, Christian husbands, may twist scriptures in order to gaslight you, to control you, and basically are weaponizing scripture for their own control and gain in order to control you and dominate over you. And we're going to break down some scriptures today to let you know what the scripture really means, because a lot of these scriptures are twisted in order to gain control. Sometimes your clergy may do that. Sometimes your parents may do that. And sometimes your husbands may do that. And so Christian wives find themselves in a pickle because it's like, well, I want to serve the Lord and I want to be faithful as a Christian, but I've got this situation with my husband and the scriptures clearly say I am supposed to submit to him. So we're going to break some scriptures down so that you can know that submitting does not mean that you have to lose yourself. So let's first of all break down Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. Okay, if you want to be a good Christian, you want to do it as unto the Lord, so I'm going to submit to the Lord. But this is not meaning blind faith and blind obedience and silencing your own voice, because you're not to be silent. I mean, God gave you to him as a helpmate. And so how are you going to help him if you're silencing? Because a lot of times women have a sixth sense, a perception about things around us. That's why we have a mothering spirit, a nurturing spirit, is because we can multitask around us. And men are known to be very tunnel vision. And so it's kind of like if a man is pushing a woman aside and saying, submit to me, even though most of them don't say that out loud, they're doing things that make you feel you're supposed to do it, which means basically silence yourself and just basically shut up and sit over there. And this causes your own soul to stop and become arrested in development. And that is not as unto the Lord. That's not what he wanted for you. And so you feel kind of stuck in this place of blind obedience in order to silence yourself. But really, the scripture right after that right before it, in Ephesians 5:21, it says, submit to one another out of reverence to Christ. So if we're supposed to submit to him and silence our voice, that means silence our voice, then what is that scripture before? Meaning submit one to another. So you have to be able to look at the totality of scripture when you're making some big decisions, like just letting your voice be silenced. Now, women also have to understand the leadership role of the male and has to be able to understand his logic. But if you're in a marriage where there is no leadership and the guy is just avoiding everything and you're kind of carrying a lot of the load by yourself, you are not commanded by scriptures to submit to that, because it's almost like they're under some oppression. Say they're lazy, say they're passive aggressive, say they're gaslighting you. You can't even have a conversation with them. You are not submitting as unto the Lord when you submit under that energy power of demonic. Because if they're under an oppression because they are not taking up the leadership, you don't see Christ in them, operating in them, then it's almost like you got to question yourself, what am I submitting to? Because if you're submitting to another human being that's under an oppression from a demonic spirit, you're now submitting under that spirit. And that is not as unto the Lord. So you got to break that particular scripture down. Now, the other thing is how they weaponize is the scripture in Proverbs 31. It says, she brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. So then women are complexed at the fact of, okay, well, I've got to keep doing good. I got to keep serving. I got to keep doing for him. I got to keep submitting to him. And then the women aren't reading the rest of Proverbs 31. I mean, Proverbs 31 is a transforming scripture. It talks about how she gets up in the morning, how she goes out and does her work during the day. She's a creator. She takes care of her own business. And sometimes when you're under this oppressed spirit with the husband, you find yourself not wanting to do any of that. Because you're like, okay, I can't move. I can't move here. He gets mad if I do this. That is all him trying to control you and your first initial priority has to be as unto the Lord. So I tell women when they're in this situation, first of all, fix yourself. If you cannot move him because it's like moving a wet noodle, just fix yourself unto the Lord. Take some time with you and God to reestablish your own grounding. Do some meditation work, do some scripture work, make some routines in your life, and take care of your own soul to where you can start finding yourself and the rhythm of your own soul. And when you start doing that, you're going to start finding some joy. You're going to start finding some peace. You're going to start finding some motivation and inspiration, which is all elevating your energies. Now, it may cause a little conflict in the relationship because he's going to see you kind of moving around. Now, I'm not saying to be unfaithful and go out, nightclub hopping or anything like that, but start really nurturing your own soul. Begin to make your relationships with your children healthier, even if he is standing in the way somehow of that. Because when you're in an oppressed home, it's like the children are oppressed or oppressed as well. And so you probably have not been able to navigate your relationship with your kids either very well because of this oppressive spirit. Listen, you can't save his soul. You can only save yours, and you can save your relationships with your children. But a lot of times men and spiritual leaders will weaponize these particular scriptures in order for you to obey them. And because mainly they have control issues within themselves. Like they can't control themselves. They can't have the inspiration or the motivation themselves. So they're getting that energy from controlling others. And so yes, they may have an issue, but you have to deal with that issue by pulling yourself into your own zone. I say stay on your side of the street. If there's two roads going parallel, going into the same direction, and it's you and your husband, then you have to kind of stop letting him dump his stuff over to your side of the street, kind of push it back to him. Do not fear. Don't be scared. He may get angry. He may pout. He's probably doing that anyway. And so you just have to find your own balance and your own center. And that's how you start you start the process of not allowing the scripture to be weaponized against you. Genesis says, your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. People get this one confused. This was a curse because of the fallen situation in earth. It wasn't about women wanting their husbands and then they're not gonna get their husbands and their husbands are gonna look around and all that kind of stuff. It's a curse because of the fallen situation. It is not a command for you to do that, even if he's ignoring you. Again, the major scripture is the scripture of submit one to another. This is when he is understanding your gifting of perception and intuition, which is naturally given to the woman, the ability to multitask, the ability to see the big picture rather than the tunnel vision picture. And if he's submitting one to another with you, he's going to appreciate that. He's going to respect that. He's going to open himself up to that. And so that plays out in conversations. So it's not about do as I say. It is more about let's have a conversation about it. So the communication is the number one reason that marriages are struggling, but it's really not communication. It is about we're not talking about the right things. We're talking about surface things. And so when you have a relationship that has communication problems and you're a wife and your husband will not talk, then you have to, if you can't try to talk to him, you have to just work on your own life. The other situation that men weaponize and women allow it, especially Christian women, is the woman's body is for the man. Well, not to be abused. The woman's body is for the man when there is a joint collaboration between y'all. Now, I also fuss at women because women withhold sex from men, which is a manipulation, if they're not getting their way with their husband. That has to be some conversation with you and your husband and letting him know why you're withholding sex. that you're not able to continue in a relationship that's sexual if y'all can't get emotionally intimate. And then if he doesn't know how to do that, then you have to get some help for y'all. But the emotional intimacy is very important, because I don't want you to abuse yourself sexually if you're having sex with a husband you're not emotionally connected to. And so you have to be careful with the sexuality, because you'll start to feel abused. He'll start to feel like he's abusing you sexually, when really sex is the last thing to go, because the other parts of the marriage that need to be healthy or fractured. And you got to deal with those parts instead. Now, when you're withholding sex from a man, you have to understand that if you withhold it, where else is he going to get it, right? If he's covenant to the marriage and he's faithful to the marriage, then where is he going to get it? So you have to start having conversations, because you cannot stay in a marriage and abuse him by withholding sex if y'all are not communicating about what's really wrong with the marriage, and you just go day after day after day after day. So there's a lot of manipulation around scripture, around roles, around sex that happens on both parts, that all that withdrawal is needing to be talked about. And if you don't talk about it, then you have to make some decisions, because you can't withhold from one another. He can't withhold intimate emotion from you. You can't hold intimate sex from him. So there's got to be some conversation of what are we going to do moving forward, because if you withhold each other from each other, you are giving a cage to the other one to live in, and that is not scripture at all.